Clara Davis sat in the far corner of her herbal remedies shop, the warm scent of dried lavender and sage wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. At 72, she had become a fixture in Louisville, Kentucky, known for her calming teas and earthy remedies. Yet, today, she felt like she was invisible. The walls of the shop were lined with glass jars, each filled with dried herbs she had meticulously sourced from around the country. The vibrant greens, browns, and purples offered a stark contrast to the dull weight pressing on her chest. She had built this shop from the ground up, had nurtured it through all the years, and yet, none of it filled the aching void inside her. The same void that had existed ever since Jake, her son, turned her world upside down all those years ago. She had spent so much time pouring herself into others, into her son, into her work, but somewhere along the way, she had become a stranger to herself. No longer the young woman with bright eyes full of dreams, Clara had transformed into Miss Clara, the kindly old woman whose wisdom was appreciated in the community, but whose inner world remained as distant and fractured as the forgotten corners of her shop. Her mind often wandered back to those years with Jake, years that should have been full of joy but instead had been marked by a sharp, constant sting. The memories of his childhood filled her with a strange mix of love and pain. She used to wonder where she went wrong, but the truth was, she couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. Jake had changed. And with him, so had Clara. She let out a soft sigh, shaking the thoughts away. The shop was her safe space, but even here, the ghosts of her past hovered, refusing to let her forget. Clara's fingers hovered over the cup of chamomile tea she had been holding for far longer than necessary. Her hands, once graceful and steady, now trembled slightly, perhaps from age, or maybe from the quiet stirrings of a longing she had buried deep within herself. Life had a way of slipping past her, unnoticed. People came to her shop to buy her remedies, ask for advice, or simply share their small troubles. And Clara was always there, listening with kindness, offering her words of comfort. But when the door closed behind each customer, she was alone again, her heart still aching, still unseen. She had gotten used to it, being invisible. It was easier than confronting the fact that no one seemed to truly know her anymore. The bell over the door jingled as someone entered, breaking the silence of her thoughts. Clara quickly straightened in her chair, offering the warm, familiar smile she had perfected over the years. "Good afternoon, Miss Clara," the voice of Miriam, an old friend, called out cheerfully. Clara stood up to greet her, feeling a flicker of warmth in her chest at the sight of the woman who had been a constant in her life. Miriam, unlike most, had known Clara before the shop, before the years of sorrow that had clouded her heart. She had known Clara's hopes, her dreams. She had even known the young woman who, at one point, had believed in a future full of possibilities. "Hello, Miriam," Clara said, her voice soft but genuine. "How are you today?" Miriam's smile faltered as she studied Clara for a moment. Miriam had always been perceptive, and today, she seemed to be seeing something beyond the surface. "I'm doing well, but you look like you've been carrying the weight of the world again." Miriam stepped closer, her eyes warm but concerned. "Clara, is everything all right?" Clara shifted uncomfortably, but the question, though tender, had the power to pierce the walls she had built around herself. She didn't want to burden Miriam with her troubles. Everyone in her life had enough of their own to worry about, and what good would it do to add her own pain to their load? "I'm fine, Miriam," Clara said, her words barely a whisper. "Just tired, I suppose. Nothing to worry about." But Miriam wasn't convinced. She knew better. The two women had shared so many years of friendship, after all. Miriam stepped closer, her hands resting gently on Clara's shoulders, offering a quiet comfort. "You know, Clara," Miriam began slowly, "you've built something so special here. Your shop, your knowledge, people come to you not just for herbs, but for something they can't find anywhere else, peace, understanding. You've given so much of yourself to others, and it's time someone gave something back to you." Clara felt a lump rise in her throat. It was the first time in so long that someone had spoken to her like this. Miriam was right, of course. The shop had become a sanctuary for many. But Clara had never allowed herself to hope that something might be offered back to her in return. It had always been about giving, about providing others with the healing she herself so desperately needed. "What are you trying to say?" Clara asked, the words coming out more brittle than she intended. Miriam hesitated, then took a deep breath. "You deserve to be seen, Clara. You've worked hard all your life, and you've earned the recognition. I want to invite you to an event, something celebrating women's entrepreneurship. It's a gathering of like-minded women who've built businesses and legacies. You should be there. You've created something incredible, and it's time people acknowledged that. Clara blinked, surprised. Miriam was known for her activism, for supporting women in the community, but an event like this felt like a dream, a world that had always felt just out of her reach. Why me? Clara asked quietly, her voice filled with doubt. I'm just an old woman selling herbs and teas. Nothing special about that. Miriam took her hands in hers, her grip firm and warm. Don't sell yourself short, Clara. What you've built is extraordinary. People like you, with the heart to heal, to nurture, those are the ones who deserve recognition. This event could be a chance for you to be celebrated for all that you've given to others. It could be the beginning of something new for you. Clara's heart stirred with something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. A fluttering in her chest, the faintest whisper of something she had buried beneath years of silence and waiting. Maybe Miriam was right. Maybe she could be seen for once, truly seen. I don't know, Clara said, her voice hesitant. What if it's just another disappointment? Miriam smiled, her eyes soft. What if it's the beginning of something wonderful? You never know unless you take that first step. Clara stood still for a moment, her mind swirling. The idea of being recognized, of stepping into a space where she wasn't just Miss Clara, the shopkeeper, but a woman with her own story to tell, was both exhilarating and terrifying. Could she allow herself to hope for something more? Miriam's words echoed in her mind. You've earned it. All right, Clara finally said, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. I'll go. For once, I'll allow myself to dream. Miriam's smile widened, her eyes shining with warmth. That's the spirit. I'll send you the details. You won't regret it, Clara. I promise. As Miriam left the shop, Clara remained standing by the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she set down the teacup. For the first time in years, a flicker of excitement lit up her heart. Maybe this event, this recognition, could be the moment she had been waiting for. The day of the event arrived faster than Clara expected, and with it, a knot of anticipation in her stomach. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. Her gray hair, which she usually kept in a neat bun, was a little messy today, with a few stray wisps falling around her face. The lines on her face, the years of hard work and sorrow, were still there, but today, she looked at them differently. Today, she didn't see just the weight of a life lived in silence, but a life that had persevered, that had fought to build something lasting. She reached for the simple, elegant dress Miriam had convinced her to wear, a soft green fabric that reminded her of springtime. She wasn't used to dressing up. Most days she wore simple skirts and blouses, practical and comfortable. But today felt different. Today, she wanted to wear something that reflected the possibility of the future she was beginning to envision. Something that felt like more than just a faded memory. With a deep breath, she pulled the dress on and adjusted it in front of the mirror. It fit perfectly, gently hugging her frame. She smoothed the fabric with both hands and straightened her posture, standing taller than she had in years. Her reflection wasn't the woman who had been crushed by the weight of her son's abuse. It wasn't the woman who had spent years shrinking into the background. It was the woman who had built something with her own hands, a woman with wisdom and strength, even if it had taken her a long time to remember it. Clara took one last look in the mirror before stepping away. She wasn't sure what would happen tonight, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of possibility. A glimmer of something more. Her heart fluttered as she walked into the shop to lock the door for the night. It felt strange, almost surreal, to be closing it up earlier than usual. She usually stayed open until dusk, listening to the familiar sounds of her shop, the rustle of paper bags, the faint murmur of customers sharing their stories, the low hum of the old fan in the corner. Tonight, however, the shop was empty and quiet. She was alone, and yet she wasn't. She felt something new stirring inside her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel for a long time. She slipped her coat over her dress and grabbed her purse, the weight of it light against her side. Her heart raced a little faster as she stepped outside into the cool evening air. The streets of Louisville were busy, but it was the kind of bustle that was comforting, a reminder that life was still happening, still moving, even when it felt like everything had come to a halt. Clara took the bus to the venue, her fingers lightly tapping against the seat beside her, trying to calm her nerves. She didn't know what to expect at this event. Miriam had described it as a celebration of women entrepreneurs, a gathering of women who had fought through adversity to build something of their own. Clara hadn't thought of herself as one of them, not really. She had always been too focused on surviving, too concerned with keeping the shop afloat, to think of herself as an entrepreneur. When the bus reached the venue, Clara took a deep breath and stepped off. The event hall was a beautiful, old building, with large windows that let in the fading sunlight, casting everything in a golden glow. There was a buzz of excitement in the air, the kind of energy that made her feel like she was about to step into something new. She had forgotten what it felt like to be part of something bigger than herself, to be among people who shared a sense of purpose. She walked inside, her heels clicking lightly on the polished floors. The room was already filled with women, some of them in business suits, others in more casual attire, all of them chatting and laughing in groups. Clara hesitated, feeling the familiar pang of being an outsider, but she pushed it aside. She had come here for herself, not for anyone else. Miriam spotted her almost immediately. She waved her over, her eyes lighting up when she saw Clara. Clara. Miriam greeted her, her voice warm. I'm so glad you made it. You look wonderful. Clara smiled softly. Thank you, Miriam. This is a lot more than I expected. Miriam chuckled, taking Clara's arm. Trust me, it's a lot for everyone the first time. But you'll fit right in. I know it. The room was filled with laughter and conversation, and Clara found herself drawn into it, bit by bit. Miriam introduced her to several women, some she had heard of in passing, others who seemed to have built impressive businesses. She felt a little out of place, but as the evening wore on, she began to relax. Eventually, the event organizer took the stage, and the chatter quieted. She was a tall woman, with short-cropped hair and an air of authority about her. She introduced the speakers for the evening, but Clara wasn't really listening. She was looking around, taking it all in, the sense of accomplishment, of strength that filled the room. These women weren't just survivors, they were thrivers. They had built something from the ground up, just like she had with her shop. A part of Clara had always felt like she didn't belong in the same room as them. But tonight, surrounded by these women, she realized something: she did belong. She had worked just as hard. She had faced her own battles. And maybe, just maybe, she had earned her place here, too. After the speeches, there was a small reception, and Clara found herself standing by the punch bowl, chatting with a woman who owned a local bakery. The conversation was easy, flowing, and Clara found herself laughing for the first time in ages. It felt so normal, so human. She wasn't just the woman behind the counter anymore. She was Clara Davis, the woman who had built a business, who had faced challenges, who had made it through the dark times. She was more than just her past. At some point during the evening, the organizer made an announcement. And now, we'd like to recognize a special guest. Clara Davis, the founder of Herbal Serenity, a shop that has touched so many lives in this community with her wisdom and remedies. Clara, would you please come forward? Clara's breath caught in her throat. Her heart skipped a beat. This was it. The moment. She had been so caught up in everything else that she hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to be seen. Miriam squeezed her arm. Go on, Clara. You've earned this. With a deep breath, Clara stood up, walking toward the stage. The applause that followed her felt like a dream. It was warm, genuine. As she stood there, at the front of the room, a sense of peace washed over her. For the first time in years, she felt recognized. She felt valued. Not for what she had given, not for what she had built, but simply for who she was. She looked out at the faces in the crowd, some of them familiar, others new, and she realized something important. This was just the beginning. Clara stood at the front of the room, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the microphone. The applause still echoed in her ears, but it wasn't the applause that mattered, it was the moment. The moment she had waited for, though she hadn't known it until now. She wasn't just Miss Clara, the herbalist. She wasn't just the woman with the jars of dried herbs and the wisdom of years gone by. For the first time, she was seen. And it felt like a revelation. The microphone was cold in her hand, the sound system amplifying her every breath. For a moment, she wasn't sure if she could speak. But then, as if something deep within her had stirred, she took a steadying breath and began. I don't know what to say, Clara started, her voice a little shaky but growing steadier with every word. I've spent so many years hiding in plain sight, behind my counter, behind my herbs. I suppose I thought that was enough, that I could be content just being there for others. That I could be content in the quiet, unnoticed. She paused, her heart beating wildly in her chest. She could feel the eyes of the room on her, but this time, it didn't frighten her. It felt like a release. But the truth is, Clara continued, her voice stronger now, I've spent too long letting my own dreams wither. I built this shop, this place of healing, and I poured everything I had into it. And it's wonderful. It truly is. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to heal myself. I forgot to dream. I forgot to live for me. She looked around the room, catching the gazes of the women who were listening intently. Some had kind, understanding smiles. Others were nodding, recognizing something in her words. Clara felt a strange sense of connection, something that transcended age, experience, or success. It was a shared understanding. I've had my share of losses, she said quietly, her gaze dropping for a moment. The memories of Jake, of the years of heartbreak, of all the years of waiting for someone to see her, flashed briefly in her mind. But she wouldn't let those memories hold her anymore. She had reclaimed her own voice, and nothing could take that away. But I've learned something in all those years. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to step into the light and ask for what you deserve. The room was still, hanging on to her every word. Clara felt the weight of their attention, but it wasn't overwhelming anymore. She embraced it, welcomed it, because she was finally speaking her truth. I've spent so long giving, so long putting others first, that I forgot to care for myself. I forgot that I matter, too. That I have worth, just like everyone else in this room. And so, I'm here to tell you, and maybe remind myself, that we are never too old to dream. We are never too old to be seen. She could hear the faint, encouraging murmurs in the room. It was as if they were all quietly cheering her on, acknowledging the strength it took to stand there and admit something so simple, yet so profound, that she, too, had a place in the world. That she, too, had the right to hope, to dream, to be recognized. The applause that followed felt different this time. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was genuine. The women in the room weren't just applauding her words, they were applauding her bravery, her willingness to show vulnerability. Clara felt a wave of emotion surge through her chest, and for a moment, she thought she might cry. But no, she wouldn't cry. Not today. Today was about strength, about reclaiming what she had almost forgotten. She smiled, a genuine smile, the kind she hadn't worn in years. Thank you, Clara said simply, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for seeing me. With that, she stepped away from the microphone, her heart pounding, her chest rising and falling with each breath. As she made her way back to her seat, she felt lighter somehow, as though a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, Clara Davis felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Clara found herself in more conversations, her voice flowing more easily now, her words no longer guarded. Women came up to her, congratulating her, telling her how much her words had meant to them. One woman, a jewelry designer, even offered to collaborate with her, suggesting that they create a line of handcrafted jewelry inspired by Clara's healing herbs. Clara had never thought of herself as someone who could collaborate, but now, the idea filled her with excitement. Why not? Why not reach for something bigger? As the event wound down, Clara found herself standing by the entrance, watching the women laugh and chat, exchanging business cards and plans for the future. She had made connections, real ones. Connections that went beyond business, beyond the usual pleasantries. These were women who saw each other, who lifted each other up. For the first time in years, Clara felt a spark of hope, not just for her business, but for herself. She had spent so many years waiting for something outside herself to change, for someone to come along and make her feel worthy. But today, she had made that change herself. She had taken the first step toward claiming her own worth, toward taking up space in a world that had tried to push her to the edges. She stepped outside into the cool evening air, breathing in deeply, as though the world had suddenly opened up to her. The streets of Louisville were still bustling, the sound of laughter and music drifting through the air. Clara smiled to herself. It was as if the city itself was welcoming her back into the fold, reminding her that life was still there for the taking, even at 72. And then, just as she was about to make her way home, a familiar voice called out to her. Clara. She turned to see Miriam approaching, her face lit up with excitement. Miriam wrapped her in a tight hug, and Clara felt a warmth spread through her. You were incredible, Miriam said, her voice filled with admiration. You've done something tonight that so many of us wish we could do. You've shown us all what it means to stand in your truth. Clara laughed softly, the sound light and free. I think I'm still trying to figure it out myself. Miriam grinned. Well, you're already ahead of the rest of us. Clara chuckled and looked out at the crowd of women still gathered inside. For the first time in ages, she didn't feel like an outsider. She didn't feel like the invisible woman in the corner. She felt like a part of something, something bigger than herself, something beautiful and full of possibility. As she and Miriam walked down the street, Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. Maybe the past had shaped her, but it didn't define her. She had reclaimed her own story tonight. And that, she realized, was just the beginning. Clara and Miriam walked down the sidewalk, the noise of the city around them feeling different now, lighter, almost as though the world had shifted, even if just slightly. The gentle hum of the evening, the chatter of people passing by, the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze, everything felt vibrant in a way it hadn't before. Clara looked at Miriam, grateful for the encouragement she had given her, but also for something more, the friendship that had remained constant, even when Clara had withdrawn into her own quiet corner. You know, Miriam said after a moment, I think tonight really marked something big for you. Not just the recognition, but your willingness to finally embrace what you've been building all these years. Clara nodded, feeling the truth of Miriam's words settle into her chest. I didn't realize how much I was holding back. I've spent so long hiding from the world, thinking I wasn't worthy of anything beyond the shop, beyond my herbs. But now, it feels different. Like there's more I can give. More I can do for myself. That's the first step, Miriam said with a soft chuckle. You know, most people spend their whole lives looking for validation outside of themselves. But the kind of power you tapped into tonight, that's the kind that comes from within. You don't need anyone else to see you, you just need to see yourself. Clara took a deep breath, feeling something settle into her bones. Miriam was right. For so long, she had been waiting for someone to acknowledge her, to tell her that she mattered. But now, she knew it was up to her. She had to start seeing her own worth, regardless of the external recognition. The validation she craved wouldn't come from the outside world, it had to come from within. I think I'm starting to understand that, Clara said softly. But it's still hard to shake the old habits. The years of feeling invisible, they don't just go away. Miriam smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. No, they don't. But that doesn't mean you can't change the way you see yourself. You've done it tonight. You took the first step, Clara. And trust me, once you start recognizing your own worth, you'll wonder why you ever let yourself be invisible in the first place. Clara felt a gentle warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful, as though the future held something she could reach for, something that wasn't just a distant dream. Maybe it wasn't too late to pursue her own dreams, to push herself further than she ever had before. As they reached the end of the block, Clara stopped and looked up at the night sky. It was a clear evening, and the stars twinkled above, faint but steady. She hadn't noticed how long it had been since she had really taken in the sky, the world around her. Everything seemed so much clearer now, as though a veil had been lifted from her eyes. You know, Miriam, Clara said thoughtfully, I think I've been so focused on what I didn't have, I missed everything I've already built. I've spent years giving and giving, but I never really gave myself anything back. Miriam squeezed her shoulder, her expression kind. It's easy to get caught up in that, isn't it? The idea that we have to be everything to everyone else before we can be something for ourselves. But you've already given so much, Clara. It's time to give to yourself. Time to finally be yourself. Clara smiled, the words sinking in deeper than she expected. It felt almost like an exhale she hadn't realized she was holding. The weight that had settled on her shoulders for so long was beginning to lift, piece by piece. Maybe it wasn't about abandoning her shop or her customers. Maybe it wasn't about choosing between herself and the life she had built. Maybe it was simply about embracing both, the love she had for others, and the love she could finally show herself. Thank you, Miriam, Clara said softly. I don't know if I would have ever gotten here without you. Miriam's eyes softened. You would have, she said, her voice warm. But sometimes, we all need someone to remind us of the things we've forgotten about ourselves. The two women stood in silence for a moment, the cool air swirling around them. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that came from years of knowing one another, understanding each other without the need for words. Clara felt her heart lighten with each passing second, as though the night was gently opening a door to something new. Well, I'm going to walk you home, Miriam said after a while. You've had enough of an adventure for one night. Clara laughed softly. I'd like that. As they walked back to her modest little house, Clara found herself thinking about everything she had left to give. Not just to the world, but to herself. Her herbal remedies, her shop, her life, she had built something beautiful, but it wasn't the only thing she had to offer. She had so much more inside of her, waiting to be nurtured. Her own dreams, her own ambitions. When they reached Clara's house, Miriam gave her a quick hug. "Remember, Clara," she said, "you don't have to wait for the world to recognize you. You've already made your mark. Now, just keep going. Don't stop." Clara nodded, her smile steady. "I won't." As Miriam turned and walked down the street, Clara stood in the doorway of her small home, watching the stars above. The gentle light from her porch lantern cast long shadows, but in the darkness, Clara saw something new, the flicker of possibility. A new chapter, just waiting to be written. That night, Clara went inside and sat at her desk, where she had spent countless hours writing down recipes, concocting teas, and creating remedies for others. This time, she took out a blank sheet of paper and began to write a list of things she wanted to do for herself, things that had nothing to do with anyone else. Travel. Learn. Write her own book. Reconnect with old friends. Build something even more than her shop. The list grew longer with each passing thought. Each idea felt like a seed, ready to be planted. Clara smiled, setting down the pen. It was time to stop waiting. Time to stop pretending she wasn't worthy of a life beyond her shop. She had built something beautiful, but it was time to start living for herself. As Clara turned off the light and climbed into bed that night, she felt a strange peace settle over her. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was finally starting to live. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had everything she needed right within her. All the recognition, all the fulfillment, all the joy, it had always been there, just waiting for her to see it. The days that followed Clara's event were filled with a quiet, yet purposeful energy. For the first time in years, she found herself waking up each morning with a sense of direction, a feeling that her life was hers again. The echoes of her son's past manipulations and the ghosts of long-lost dreams no longer held the same grip on her heart. She had shifted. The ground had moved beneath her feet, and she was standing taller than she had in years. She returned to her shop, but this time with a new sense of ownership over the space. The shelves of herbs and tinctures, the familiar scent of dried lavender that always seemed to calm her, didn't just feel like the remnants of a life she had built for others, they were symbols of her own resilience, the quiet strength that had carried her through decades of hardship. This was her place, and she was ready to make it more than just a store. It was a sanctuary, not just for her customers, but for herself. Clara decided it was time to start making changes in the shop. It wasn't about drastically altering the business. She wasn't ready to give up what had sustained her for so long. It was about expanding her vision, about taking a step towards something bigger than just the counter she stood behind each day. She ordered new supplies, not just herbs and remedies, but books about herbs, wellness, and alternative healing practices. She began researching classes she could take, workshops she could attend to further her knowledge. The idea of learning something new, of growing in ways she hadn't allowed herself before, excited her. And then there was the idea of teaching. Clara had spent years as the one providing guidance, but it had never occurred to her that she could also teach others. Perhaps there was a way for her to bring a sense of community into the shop, to host gatherings, to share her knowledge not just as a healer, but as a teacher. She would offer classes on herbal remedies, on how to brew the perfect tea, how to identify wild herbs in the woods behind the town. The idea made her heart race with excitement. It was something she could do for herself, something that was hers to shape and mold. But even with all the possibilities that seemed to unfold before her, there was still the shadow of her past that lingered just outside the door. Jake. Her son. The one piece of her life that she had never been able to fully escape. She had worked so hard to rebuild herself, to reclaim the parts of her that had been buried, but there was still the part of her that wondered, would Jake come back into her life? And if he did, how would she respond? She hadn't seen him in years, ever since he had left, taking everything with him. He had used her, manipulated her, and taken advantage of the love she had given him. But now, as she stood in the quiet shop, the weight of those years felt more like a distant memory than something she was still living. She wasn't that woman anymore. And yet, when the phone rang one evening, Clara's heart skipped. She knew, somehow, who it was before she even picked up the receiver. "Mom?" The voice on the other end was hoarse, weak. It was Jake. Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself, and then answered. "Jake," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "What is it?" There was a long pause before Jake spoke again, his words slow and labored. I I need your help, Mom. I've I've been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The doctors say, they say it's going to get worse. I I don't have anywhere else to go. Clara felt a chill run through her, but she didn't let it show. She could hear the desperation in his voice, the same voice that had once used her, manipulated her into feeling sorry for him, into giving him everything. The voice that had taken her love and turned it into a weapon. I see, Clara said, her voice steady, though every word felt like it came from a different place. And you want me to help you. You want me to take care of you. Please, Mom, Jake begged. I don't know what else to do. I've got nowhere to go. You're the only one I can turn to. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, her mind racing. She had spent years building the strength to let go of him. To let go of the idea that she had to be the one to fix him, to make up for the mistakes he had made. He had taken so much from her already, had broken her heart so many times. And now, when he needed her again, when he came back with his tail between his legs, asking for help, the temptation to offer it was overwhelming. But Clara wasn't the same woman she had been back then. She had learned, in her time of healing, that there was a difference between loving someone and enabling them. She had spent so many years enabling Jake, always believing that if she just gave him more of herself, more of her love, more of her time, he would change. But he hadn't changed. He had used her. I'm sorry, Jake, Clara said, her voice steady and calm, yet firm. I can't help you. Not like this. There was silence on the other end of the line, and Clara could almost hear the disbelief in his silence. What? He finally asked, his voice cracking. You're just going to turn me away. I'm not turning you away, Jake. I'm letting you face the consequences of your actions. You've hurt me for far too long, and I'm done allowing myself to be the one you turn to when things fall apart. You've lost that right. You're not the person I raised anymore. And I can't keep pretending that you are. Clara's words hung heavy in the air between them, and for the first time, she didn't feel the pang of guilt she once would have. She felt something else, a sense of relief, of empowerment, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Goodbye, Jake, Clara said quietly, before she hung up the phone. She stood there for a long time afterward, staring at the phone in her hand. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, lost in thought. But when she finally put the phone down, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, peace. That night, Clara went to bed with a sense of finality. She had made the choice for herself, and it had been the right one. For the first time in her life, she had let go of the guilt, the fear, the need to be the one to save someone who wasn't willing to save themselves. She could finally live for herself, without the chains of her past holding her back. As Clara drifted off to sleep, she dreamed not of the life she had lost, but of the life she was about to build. A life of strength, of purpose, of dreams that were finally her own. The days that followed Clara's decision to let go of Jake felt both freeing and surreal. It was as though a fog that had clouded her life for years was beginning to lift, revealing a clearer, more defined path ahead. She had always been the one to hold on, to nurture, to fix the broken pieces of those around her, especially her son. Letting go, truly letting go, was something Clara had never imagined she could do. But she had done it. And for the first time in a long while, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The decision wasn't easy. There were nights when she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had made the right choice. Could she really turn her back on her own flesh and blood? Was there a line that she could never cross, no matter how much pain he had caused her? But then, she remembered the lessons she had learned through the years. She had spent so much time putting everyone else's needs before her own, allowing herself to be the fixer, the caretaker, the one who always showed up for others. But she had to stop pretending she could fix people who didn't want to be fixed. Each time those thoughts crept in, Clara reminded herself that her decision wasn't about abandoning Jake, it was about saving herself. She had spent far too long waiting for him to change, waiting for him to show up as the man she hoped he could be. But hope alone wasn't enough. She had built a life for herself, a life that, for the first time, felt like it was hers and hers alone. By the end of the week, Clara had fully immersed herself in the changes she had started to make in the shop. She had arranged the jars of herbs in new ways, placing them in order of their healing properties instead of by the usual categories. She added a new display near the counter, showcasing books on herbal remedies and natural wellness, books she had ordered the previous week, inspired by the thought of finally learning more, of diving deeper into a world she had always loved, but had never truly explored. But it wasn't just the physical changes that were taking shape. Clara had started offering small workshops on herbal remedies and mindfulness, using the knowledge she had accumulated over the years. The first class was held on a Saturday afternoon, and though Clara was nervous, she was also excited. The small group of women who attended seemed just as eager as she was to learn. They laughed and asked questions, and Clara found herself sharing her own personal stories of healing, stories she had never told anyone, not even Miriam. As the weeks passed, her classes grew in popularity. More and more people were coming into the shop, not just for remedies, but for guidance. Clara realized that in teaching, she wasn't just sharing her knowledge about herbs. She was sharing pieces of herself, of her own healing, of her own growth. She had spent so many years giving and giving, but this was the first time she had allowed herself to receive something in return: connection, validation, the joy of being recognized not just for what she could give, but for who she was. One evening, after another successful class, Clara sat down at her desk, the soft light of the desk lamp casting a warm glow over her shop. She had finally taken the time to sit and write, something she had always wanted to do but never felt like she had the space for. She pulled out a blank sheet of paper and began to write. "I spent so many years pretending I wasn't enough," she wrote, her pen moving slowly across the page. "I thought that if I just gave enough, if I just tried hard enough, someone would finally see me. But the truth is, I was already enough. I just had to see it for myself." The words came easily to her now, flowing like a river that had been dammed up for far too long. She wrote about her shop, about the women who had come into her life, about the pain she had carried for so many years, and how she had let it go. She wrote about Jake, about the love and the hurt, and how she had learned to forgive herself, even if she couldn't forgive him. She wrote about Miriam, her steadfast friend who had seen her when no one else had, and about the quiet strength that had always been there, waiting for Clara to tap into it. As Clara finished writing, she felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. She had been through so much, but she had finally found the courage to step into the light, to embrace her own worth, and to let go of the things that had been holding her back. The phone rang suddenly, cutting through the stillness of the shop. Clara picked it up, not recognizing the number, but instinctively knowing it wasn't Jake. "Hello?" Clara answered, her voice steady. "Clara Davis?" the voice on the other end asked. "Yes, speaking. This is Caroline Walker from the Louisville Wellness Network. We've been hearing a lot of great things about your shop, and we were wondering if you'd be interested in partnering with us for an upcoming wellness fair we're hosting next month. We'd love for you to offer a class on herbal remedies, and maybe even sell some of your products." Clara blinked, unsure if she had heard the woman correctly. "Wait, you want me to be part of the wellness fair?" "That's right," Caroline said, her tone warm and professional. "We think your shop and your expertise would be a great addition to the event. It's a big opportunity, Clara. We're reaching out to several local businesses, and we'd love for you to be a part of it." Clara sat in stunned silence for a moment, the weight of the offer settling in. It felt like an opportunity she had never expected, one that came out of nowhere, but one that seemed to align perfectly with everything she had been working toward. "Yes," Clara said, her voice calm but filled with excitement. "I would love to be a part of the wellness fair." The conversation continued, and Clara agreed to the details. The event would be a significant step forward for her business, but more than that, it would be a recognition of everything she had accomplished on her own. It was the validation she had been searching for, the moment that confirmed her place in the world. As Clara hung up the phone, she leaned back in her chair, her heart racing. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for, not from anyone else, but from herself. She had built this business, had healed herself, and now, she was ready to share it with the world. The future was full of possibilities, and Clara Davis was finally ready to embrace them all. As the wellness fair approached, Clara threw herself into preparations with a renewed sense of excitement and purpose. For the first time in a long time, she felt the thrill of anticipation, the kind of energy that comes when you're about to step into something unknown, yet full of potential. The fair was being held at the Louisville Convention Center, a large space with high ceilings and rows of vendor booths lined up like a mini marketplace for health and wellness. She'd never participated in anything of this scale before, but she was determined to make her mark. The first few days after agreeing to the event were a blur of organizing, contacting suppliers, and refining her classes. Clara had always been meticulous, but this felt different. This wasn't just about making sales, this was about showcasing everything she had built over the years. She pulled out her notebook, the one she had used for years to jot down recipes, remedies, and ideas. It was well worn now, its edges frayed from years of use, and yet, it felt like an old friend in her hands. Clara wrote down a list of topics she wanted to cover in her class on herbal remedies. She decided to center the class around how everyday herbs could help with stress and anxiety, something that felt deeply personal. Her own experience with dealing with loss, with the weight of loneliness, and with the silence of a life spent in waiting had taught her a great deal about the healing power of nature. She knew her class wouldn't just be about herbs, it would be about her own journey of rediscovery, of reclaiming the pieces of herself she had forgotten. As the days wore on, the reality of the event began to set in. Clara found herself waking early, ready to face the day with a sense of excitement that had been missing from her life for far too long. She spent hours crafting her booth, arranging jars of dried herbs in neat rows, labeling them with descriptions of their healing properties. She set out her books, the ones she had hand-picked over the years, and even made a few batches of her signature tea blends to hand out as samples. The day before the event, Clara stood in front of her booth, looking it over with a critical eye. She had spent so much time making sure every detail was perfect, her handwritten signs, the carefully folded tea towels, the fresh-cut flowers she had arranged in a vase at the corner. She wanted everything to reflect who she was, someone who had worked hard to build something meaningful, something rooted in authenticity and care. Her heart raced as she took one last glance at the booth. Everything was set. The booth was ready. She was ready. The morning of the wellness fair arrived with a clear, crisp sky. Clara woke early, feeling the familiar nerves that come with any major event, but this time, they weren't suffocating. They were exciting, invigorating. She dressed carefully in the same soft green dress she had worn to the event weeks ago, her hair neatly pinned back as she prepared for what was to come. When she arrived at the convention center, Clara was immediately struck by the size of the event. It was vast, rows and rows of booths stretched out before her, each one vying for attention. People were setting up, arranging products, chatting with one another. It was overwhelming, but at the same time, it felt like a community, a gathering of people who shared a common purpose. And in the midst of it all, Clara felt a sense of belonging, of excitement for what was to come. Her booth was located near the back of the hall, and though it wasn't in the most prominent position, it didn't matter. Clara didn't need to be front and center. She didn't need the biggest booth, the flashiest display. She knew that what mattered was the message she was sharing, the authenticity behind the products she was offering. As the first visitors began trickling in, Clara stood behind her booth, taking a deep breath. The air was filled with the hum of conversation and the soft sound of music playing in the background. She watched as people stopped at nearby booths, their eyes scanning the various offerings. Her booth was small in comparison, but it stood out in its simplicity. The wooden shelves, the hand-labeled jars, the earthy, welcoming smell of her teas, it all felt like her. It felt like home. By midday, the fair was bustling with activity. Clara found herself speaking with several people, sharing her knowledge of herbs and their benefits. She gave short talks on how chamomile could help with sleep, how lavender soothed the nervous system, and how peppermint could settle an upset stomach. Some people lingered, fascinated by her words, asking more questions, wanting to know about the herbs and their history. Others quickly moved on, but Clara didn't mind. She was doing what she loved, and for the first time, it didn't matter whether anyone stayed or not. What mattered was that she was being herself. And for once, it felt enough. At one point, a woman approached her booth, a little hesitant, but curious. She looked to be in her early 40s, with tired eyes and a weary smile. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft. "I've been hearing a lot about your shop. I was wondering if you could recommend something for stress. I've been dealing with so much lately, and I don't know where to start." Clara's heart went out to her. She had been in that place, overwhelmed, uncertain, carrying the weight of everything on her shoulders. She smiled gently and stepped closer to the booth, motioning toward the jars of herbs. "I can help with that," Clara said. "You're not alone. We all go through difficult times. I'd recommend trying a blend of chamomile, lavender, and lemon balm. It's calming, soothing, and gentle. You could brew it into a tea, or even use it in a bath if that's more your style." The woman nodded, her expression softening. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'll try that. It sounds perfect." Clara's heart warmed as she handed the woman a small sample of the tea blend. It wasn't about making a sale, it was about offering something that might truly help. This, she realized, was what it meant to connect with others. Not just through business transactions, but through shared experiences and care. As the day went on, Clara found herself interacting with more and more people, each conversation reminding her of how far she had come. The fair wasn't just about selling herbs or teaching classes, it was about something deeper. It was about making real, human connections, about finding a sense of belonging in a world that often felt too fast and too loud. By the end of the day, Clara's booth had attracted a steady stream of visitors. She had given out samples, sold some of her herbal blends, and even scheduled a few consultations for private classes. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she packed up her things that evening, her heart full. But the most important thing she had gained from the experience wasn't the sales or the recognition. It was the feeling of empowerment that had come with it. She wasn't just the woman behind the counter anymore. She wasn't just the herbalist who had been forgotten. She was Clara Davis, the woman who had built something from the ground up, and who now had the courage to step forward and share her story. As Clara left the convention center that evening, she looked around at the bustling streets of Louisville, the lights reflecting off the sidewalks, and felt a sense of gratitude. She had started her journey alone, but now, she was no longer afraid to walk her path. And for the first time, she realized that the journey was just beginning. The days following the wellness fair felt like a dream. Clara couldn't remember the last time she had felt so accomplished. Each day, she received messages and emails from people who had attended her class, thanking her for the insight and calm she had provided. They spoke of the sense of peace they had felt when they learned about the healing power of herbs, and how they had been inspired to take better care of themselves. Some even asked if she would consider hosting classes more regularly. Clara smiled to herself as she read each message. She hadn't realized how much she had been craving connection, how deeply she had longed to make a difference, even in small ways. She had always been the one giving, providing remedies, advice, a listening ear, but for the first time, it felt like the world was returning that energy to her. She spent the next few weeks organizing more classes and workshops, expanding her offerings. She had always believed that the knowledge she carried was valuable, but it was a humbling experience to see others recognize it, too. She was no longer just the quiet, old herbalist, she was Clara Davis, a woman with wisdom to share, a voice that mattered. Her shop began to draw more attention, and with each class she taught, more people came through the door, eager to learn, to connect. One afternoon, Clara was behind the counter when a familiar face appeared at the door. It was Miriam, her longtime friend, who had always been there for her, through every moment of uncertainty and strength. "Miriam," Clara called, a wide smile spreading across her face. Miriam grinned back and stepped inside, the door chiming gently behind her. "I heard about your success at the wellness fair," she said, her voice full of pride. "People can't stop talking about it." Clara felt a warmth fill her chest. "It was incredible, Miriam. I never imagined anything like it. So many people, and they actually wanted to listen to what I had to say. It was like they saw me for the first time. And I saw myself, too." Miriam nodded, her eyes gleaming with understanding. "That's the thing, isn't it? When you finally see yourself, others start to see you too. I always knew you had this potential, Clara, but I'm so happy you're finally stepping into it." Clara felt a sense of gratitude she couldn't quite express. Miriam had always been there, offering a steady, unwavering support. It was as if Miriam had believed in her before she ever could. "Thank you, Miriam. Truly. I don't think I would have gotten here without you." Miriam waved her hand dismissively. "No need for thanks. I just gave you a little push. You did all the hard work." Clara laughed, but it was a soft, heartfelt sound. "It feels like I've spent so many years waiting for a sign, for someone to tell me it was okay to dream again. But now I'm the one who's telling myself." The two women sat at one of Clara's wooden tables, sipping tea, chatting about everything and nothing. As they spoke, Clara found herself realizing just how far she had come. It was hard to believe that only a few months ago, she had been drowning in the quiet, weighed down by the suffocating grip of her past. But now, the future felt bright. She had created something new, something of her own. And for the first time in her life, she was truly proud of it. But even as Clara embraced this new chapter, a part of her still couldn't quite shake the worry that lingered, like a faint shadow. She hadn't heard from Jake since their conversation on the phone. Despite the peace she had found in her decision, a quiet voice inside her wondered if she had made the right choice. She had spent so many years waiting for him to change, to apologize, to offer her the love and respect she had always wanted from him. Was she wrong to turn him away, to let him face the consequences of his actions alone? She wasn't sure. But she knew, deep down, that the path she had chosen, one of independence, of growth, of reclaiming her own voice, was the right one. And that, she realized, was more important than anything else. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Clara's shop continued to grow, and the workshops she held became increasingly popular. She began offering private consultations, helping people with everything from stress management to creating their own herbal tinctures. Her presence in the community was becoming more pronounced, and Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment that she hadn't known in years. And then, one morning, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Clara Davis, Herbal Serenity, in neat, precise handwriting. She tore it open, her heart quickening with uncertainty. The letter was short, and the words within it were simple. Dear Clara, I hope this letter finds you well. I know we haven't spoken in a long time, but I wanted to reach out. I've been thinking about everything that happened between us, and I realize now how much pain I caused you. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't change anything, but I needed to say it. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Jake. Clara read the letter twice, the weight of it sinking deep into her chest. She sat down, letting the letter fall into her lap, her thoughts swirling. Part of her wanted to pick up the phone and call him, to ask him what had changed, what had brought him to this point. But another part of her, the stronger part, reminded her of how far she had come, how much she had fought to reclaim her own life. Jake's apology, if it could even be called that, was too little, too late. He had taken so much from her, had caused her so much pain, and while part of her wanted to believe that he was capable of change, another part of her knew that she couldn't sacrifice herself for him again. She folded the letter carefully and placed it on the counter. Her eyes lingered on the words, but she didn't feel anger or resentment, just a deep, quiet sense of acceptance. She had done what she needed to do, and she couldn't go back now. That evening, Clara sat down at her desk and began writing in her journal, the one she had started shortly after the wellness fair. She had filled it with thoughts, hopes, and reflections on her journey of self-discovery. The pen flowed easily across the pages as she wrote about the letter, about the decision she had made, and about the life she was building for herself. I've learned so much, she wrote. Not just about herbs and healing, but about myself. I spent so many years looking for someone to fix me, to make me feel whole. But I don't need anyone else to make me feel that way. I am whole. I am enough. Clara closed the journal with a quiet sense of satisfaction. She wasn't sure where the future would take her, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was walking her path, not waiting for someone else to lead her. The phone rang again, but this time, Clara didn't hesitate. She picked it up and answered it with the same calm, steady voice she had been practicing for months. Hello, this is Clara Davis. As the weeks passed, Clara felt a sense of calm settle into her life. The decision to focus on her shop, her classes, and her own well-being was paying off in ways she hadn't expected. She woke up each day with a sense of purpose, knowing exactly what she needed to do. The shop was thriving, and the workshops she offered were consistently full. People came not just for remedies, but for her guidance, her wisdom, and Clara was more than happy to share. In the mornings, she would walk through the town, taking in the sights and sounds of Louisville as she made her way to the shop. The familiar rhythm of the streets, the chatter of the coffee shops, the hum of the city, it was all part of the world she had once felt disconnected from, but now it felt like home. Every step she took felt deliberate, like she was walking into a future that was hers to create. The shop had become more than just a business, it had become a place of sanctuary for herself and her customers. People came to Clara not only for her remedies but for her presence. She wasn't just the old woman behind the counter anymore. She was a teacher, a mentor, and in some cases, even a friend. One afternoon, as Clara was preparing for her next workshop, a familiar face appeared at the door. It was Miriam, her loyal friend who had been by her side through every trial, every hardship. Well, look who's thriving, Miriam said with a teasing smile as she entered the shop. Clara laughed and walked over to greet her. You're not wrong, she said, her voice light. Things are going better than I could have imagined. Miriam looked around, her eyes taking in the changes. The shop felt warmer now, more alive. The once quiet shelves of herbs and tinctures now felt like a collection of lived-in memories, each jar and bottle holding a story, a purpose. The tables were filled with books on herbalism, plants, and wellness. The entire atmosphere had shifted from one of solitude to one of connection. I'm proud of you, Clara, Miriam said sincerely, her voice soft. I knew you had it in you. Clara smiled, but there was a hint of something more in her eyes. I didn't know I had it in me either. I think I've spent so many years waiting for someone else to tell me it was okay to be me. But now, I've realized I don't need anyone's permission. This is who I am. This is what I've built. And I'm finally proud of it. Miriam's eyes glistened with emotion. You should be. You've worked so hard for this. The two women shared a moment of silence, their bond unspoken but palpable. Clara had come so far, and Miriam had been there through every step of her journey. She was the friend who had seen Clara at her lowest, when she had been consumed by the weight of her past, and she had stuck by her even when Clara couldn't see the way forward. I'm starting to believe that this is my purpose, Clara said quietly, looking around the shop. It's not just about selling herbs. It's about healing, helping people, giving them the space to reconnect with themselves the way I've had to reconnect with myself. Miriam nodded thoughtfully. I think that's why people are drawn to you. You don't just sell a product, you offer a way of life, a way of seeing the world differently. Clara felt a rush of warmth in her chest. For so many years, she had wondered if her life meant anything beyond the small world of her shop. But now, she knew that her journey had purpose. She wasn't just healing others, she was healing herself. That afternoon, Miriam stayed for tea, and the two women spent hours talking about life, love, and the paths they had walked. Clara listened to Miriam's stories, her voice filled with the wisdom of experience, and Clara found herself reflecting on the path she had taken to get here. There were still moments when she felt the weight of the past, when Jake's absence still lingered like a shadow, but it didn't have the same power over her anymore. She had chosen her own life, her own story, and in doing so, she had become more than just a woman who had been left behind. She had become someone who had reclaimed her future. A few days later, Clara received another unexpected call. This time, it was from the local newspaper. They had heard about the success of her wellness classes and wanted to write a feature on her shop and the work she was doing. The reporter, a young woman named Rachel, had been following the growing interest in alternative health practices around Louisville and had heard that Clara's shop was becoming a hub for people seeking natural remedies. Clara was both flattered and surprised. She had never imagined her little herbal shop would attract so much attention, let alone a feature in the newspaper. She agreed to the interview, though her nerves started to kick in as the day approached. What would she say? What if she wasn't able to articulate the depth of what she had built? But as the morning of the interview arrived, Clara reminded herself that this was her story. She had earned the right to share it. When Rachel arrived, Clara greeted her with a warm smile and led her into the back of the shop, where the air was thick with the soothing scent of herbs. Rachel was kind, inquisitive, and genuinely interested in Clara's journey, and as Clara began to speak, the words flowed more easily than she expected. She told Rachel about the years of struggle, about the pain of losing herself in the wake of her son's abuse, and about the long road to reclaiming her sense of purpose. She spoke about her decision to let go of the past, of finally finding the strength to focus on her own healing. I think we all have a choice, Clara said thoughtfully, her hands resting on the counter. We can let our past define us, or we can choose to move forward. It's not always easy, but it's the only way we can truly live. And it's never too late. I've spent so many years thinking I was too old to start over, too old to make a change. But the truth is, the only thing standing in our way is ourselves. Rachel listened intently, nodding as Clara spoke. That's powerful, she said, her voice filled with admiration. I think a lot of people need to hear that, especially those who feel like they've missed their chance. The interview continued, and Clara found herself opening up in ways she hadn't anticipated. She shared her vision for the future, her hope to expand her classes, to reach even more people who could benefit from her knowledge. She spoke about her growing sense of community, how she had begun to see her shop not just as a business, but as a place where people could come to rediscover themselves. When the interview wrapped up, Rachel thanked Clara for her time and promised to send her the article once it was published. Clara smiled and watched her leave, feeling a sense of accomplishment, but also a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this moment. Over the next few weeks, the article was published, and it created a ripple effect. More people came to the shop, more clients signed up for Clara's workshops, and her name began to spread beyond the local community. Clara could hardly believe the transformation. Her life was no longer defined by what she had lost, but by what she had gained. One evening, as Clara closed the shop, she sat down at her desk, taking a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. The quiet hum of the shop, the soft flicker of the candlelight, all felt like part of a life she had created, a life that was entirely her own. She took out her journal and began to write, her pen moving steadily across the page. "I'm finally living the life I was meant to live," she wrote. "It's not perfect, and I'm sure there will be struggles ahead. But for the first time in years, I feel at peace with who I am. I am enough. I've always been enough. And the world is waiting for me to show up." Clara closed the journal, smiling to herself. She had finally learned to see herself, not through the lens of her past, but through the lens of her present and future. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. As the months passed, Clara's life continued to unfold in ways she had never imagined. The success of her shop and the growing community around her brought a sense of fulfillment that was deep and lasting. She had learned to open herself to new opportunities, and those opportunities seemed to be multiplying by the day. She was no longer the woman who waited in the shadows, hoping for someone to see her. She had made the decision to step into the light, to show the world the woman she had always been. Her workshops became more popular, attracting people not just from Louisville but from surrounding areas. She had started teaching advanced classes, exploring deeper aspects of herbalism and alternative healing practices. Word of mouth spread, and soon, Clara was invited to speak at local wellness events, her name becoming synonymous with natural health and holistic living. With the growth of her business came the challenge of balancing the many aspects of her life. Clara had always been meticulous, but the responsibilities of running a successful shop, teaching classes, and taking care of herself sometimes felt overwhelming. She had learned to embrace the chaos, though. It no longer felt like something to be feared. It was simply part of her life now. One morning, as Clara was opening her shop, a familiar face appeared at the door. It was Eloise, her granddaughter, the bright and independent young woman who had always kept in touch despite her father's efforts to keep them apart. Clara's heart warmed at the sight of her. "Grandma!" Eloise exclaimed, walking in with a beaming smile. She was dressed casually in a light sweater and jeans, her dark hair cascading in soft waves over her shoulders. "I've missed you." Clara smiled, feeling a surge of affection. "Eloise, it's so good to see you. What brings you here?" Eloise stepped up to the counter, her eyes scanning the shelves of herbs and books. "Well, I've been hearing all about your success, Grandma. Mom's been telling me about your workshops, your classes, and how busy you've been. It sounds like things are going really well." Clara nodded, feeling a sense of pride. "It's been a busy time, but it's been rewarding. I never imagined I'd be doing all of this at my age, but I'm glad I'm doing it." Eloise smiled, her eyes sparkling with admiration. "I'm so proud of you, Grandma. You've always been an inspiration to me. I'm actually here because I wanted to talk to you about something." Clara raised an eyebrow, curious. "What's on your mind?" Eloise hesitated for a moment before speaking, her voice soft but serious. "I've been thinking a lot lately about my own future. About what I want to do with my life. And I was hoping I could get your advice." Clara's heart swelled with warmth at her granddaughter's words. "Of course, darling. You know I'm always here for you. What's been on your mind?" Eloise took a deep breath before speaking again. "I've been working at this corporate job for the past few years, and I'm grateful for it, but I can't shake the feeling that it's not what I'm meant to be doing. I've always had a passion for wellness, for healing, and I've been thinking about starting my own business, something focused on health and natural living. But I'm scared. I don't know if I have what it takes. I look at you, Grandma, and I think, how did you do it? How did you build this life for yourself?" Clara listened intently, her heart going out to Eloise. She knew exactly what her granddaughter was feeling. The fear of taking a leap, of stepping into the unknown, was something Clara had faced herself many times. "My dear," Clara said, her voice gentle but firm, "I won't pretend it's been easy. There were times when I doubted myself, when I thought I wasn't good enough, or that it was too late for me to change. But the truth is, you never know what you're capable of until you take that first step. And if you're passionate about something, if you truly believe in it, then it's worth pursuing. Don't let fear hold you back from what you're meant to do." Eloise's eyes were wide, as though she were absorbing every word. "But what if I fail? What if I don't succeed?" Clara smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of years of living. "Failure is a part of success, Eloise. You don't learn without making mistakes. You don't grow without facing challenges. And even if things don't go exactly the way you plan, that doesn't mean you've failed. It just means you've learned something new. And believe me, the lessons you learn along the way are worth more than any achievement." Eloise nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You're right, Grandma. I guess I've been so focused on the what ifs that I forgot to think about the why nots. Clara reached across the counter and took her granddaughter's hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Exactly. You have to trust in yourself. You have everything you need within you. I didn't build this business alone. I had help, yes, but I also had to trust my instincts, my knowledge, and most importantly, my heart. And so do you. For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of Clara's words settling into the air between them. Eloise's face softened, and Clara could see the flicker of determination beginning to grow in her granddaughter's eyes. Thank you, Grandma, Eloise said, her voice filled with gratitude. I needed to hear that. I think. I think I'm ready to take the leap. I'm going to start looking into what it would take to make this dream a reality. Clara's heart swelled with pride. I'm so proud of you, Eloise. You'll do great things, I know it. Eloise gave her a warm smile. I'll keep you updated, Grandma. And maybe someday, we can work together. Clara chuckled, a sound full of warmth and affection. I'd like that. After Eloise left, Clara stood behind the counter for a moment, reflecting on their conversation. She realized that, in a way, she had passed the torch to her granddaughter. The torch of possibility, of following one's heart, of believing in oneself. It was a beautiful moment of generational connection, a passing of wisdom from one woman to another. That evening, as Clara closed the shop and locked the door, she felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. She had not only rebuilt her own life but had now helped someone else do the same. The feeling was profound. There was a deep satisfaction in knowing that she had played a part in helping Eloise find her own path. As she walked home that night, Clara reflected on how far she had come. She was no longer the woman who had been broken by the weight of her past, the woman who had spent years hiding in the shadows. She was Clara Davis, strong, resilient, and at peace with herself. And now, she was helping others do the same. The future was wide open. And for the first time in her life, Clara felt truly ready to embrace whatever came next.